may be suitable here and right now. This is just mentioned as the terrorism truck passes by. Might be standing on probability, but so suitable of mention and comparative whether it's special with this indicating remark written there. If DGF, if the hypothesis doesn't sort of complete certain sort of advances we make with whether certain spells, it doesn't indicate, sort of not an indicator at all of victory, and whether comparative small victories, whether moderate, whether minor, whether recent, and whether at first there, and whether another, and whether minor victories. It does watch via another offensive in it, and at the same time, and whether it, and whether also, and whether recent, and also, and whether recent, and whether starts inflicting back not via countering this or able to solve this or deny this. The street does the tumor cancer spread, and some of the spells are rather default. At some instances we can regard, and whether it will be regarded, and whether also it will be regarded, and whether recent and whether recent and whether also will be regarded towards, and whether recent and whether also and whether recent and whether will be regarded as if they are able to whether and or those are sort of degens and not, and those are degens and sort of the pretend dishes, or whether dramatism feigned as victim and also weaker. Both of the recent words they're weaker, and whether recent order, whether order ranging from whether recent or whether ranging, whether victim and weaker, both with core marks, and whether recent just as, and whether recent just, and whether recent or after just as, and whether recent and whether victim and weaker. But in some ways they are much stronger. These entities, and whether also entities were managed to desecration against nature, either way they are, whether also or whether and a few ways, or whether of ways of whether reason and of ways, those are larger, better, more efficient killers, whether reason a larger group, and whether faction of regular trash, and whether reason and whether of regular trash pronoun they are not of providence of force to opposites. Sometimes if I don't specify in some of the phrases, therefore as if it's about something completely else, as if that suddenly becomes the new standard also, or whether being the common standard. May I as well transport some of the notes to hearing of, and maybe just hear the note of, or rather actually some of which will still be on there, and therefore whether recent or whether there will be minor repetition of, and whether recent and whether also and whether recent and whether also whether recent and whether could be considered as also whether recent and whether minor extent of, and whether also and whether minor rather of, and whether could be considered as minor repetition of. There's tons of Nazism problems and related issues to address. It couldn't possibly be I'm one of the few candidates that ever addressed this. It's absolutely ridiculous. Maybe I'm out of 52nd, and this time we don't have a Himmler, we don't have a Gorham, and we don't have a Himmler and Gorham. We can have technologists. They don't even know what they're doing. And most of the technologists simply being in their own bubble, they're not like someone that does this greatly, therefore they have other risks. And most humanoids, whether minor rather reason there, and whether they're reason and whether and minor rather of, and whether reason they're just, and whether reason and whether they're, and the citizen card holders Vachev, or even whether reason and whether Vachev have some sort of disability and sort of fetish favor towards doing that. It's not completely of a agent on that order, whether on that sort of move. I cannot. The thing about nature is like whether the thing, a reason there, whether the thing about nature is, in order to complete something, it needs to be go the opposite way. Not throughout, overall. Sometimes it depends on the depiction. The depiction will be of certain rarity. It's sort of compelled. That reason there could be considered as another topic, whether second topic, or whether another topic of whether reason and whether another, and whether reason and whether another topic of. So to mention it in literal format, designate what they're doing, sort of does more than the opposite, and it's not going to result in the better resultant. So I'm supposed to be condemning towards those a bit more than that. But then that would have a chance, and not a full chance, or rather not comparative full, but the resultant will be a minor portion. And via such, then this sort of is designated as something normal and sort of who cares towards, or whether directly skipped about. Such a skip that it's not even announced as this has been a skip, or any sort of and the related was whether related properly to all. Nature really is, and whether often is on the simple geometry, while there's still something raw, which is a person supposed to be the candidate are tested almost not on personality in a way, it's on health first. If it doesn't have health, it often gets pain signals. Doubtfully it's going to have a decent personality, and the results will be different. At the same time, there's membership, but it takes me to sort of somewhat figure it out in order for it to. And it's not exactly there will be a winner, and that therefore, what I will be sometimes at the pinnacle level is almost no one is no one, and at the same time no one's everyone, and everyone is no one. And in order for me to speak the absolute truth, sort of that absolute, whether of advance upon, and whether advance of advance, and whether another, and whether also, and whether reason there, and whether reason adjust, and whether reason there, and whether reason adjust, and whether advanced topic, to speak the absolute truth, the more even truther than truth, so sort of even more quality than, and whether reason there, so and whether reason there, and whether reason there, and whether with another to reason there to probable of whether option, and whether to probable of optional of, so and whether reason there, and whether so a even more quality truth, it will be near impossible to accomplish. And in a way, life doesn't require that to function, and it's alright. In a way, that is sort of the maximum. So we have, in a way, the two maximums. The one is sort of the proposal, could be designated towards us. It's not to limit, therefore, there aren't others, and whether also reason there, whether reason there, and whether also other, and whether reason there, and whether another, and whether reason there, and whether reason there, and whether there, and whether reason there, and whether other descriptions of whether words towards to whether to afford to whether to afford whether, and other words of. While then we have this sort of at the functionality level, that's what renders or whether involved in the bring about of the events in the coming saga, or whether flip the page onto the next chapter. By the way, which direction is it flipped the page of? Is it left to the right? Is it to forward? Notice in time actually sort of doesn't exist. It's not so much there's being an order of things, it's that this is being the regular order. And any abnormality is named as déjà vu, or tries to claim back and accumulate, well, some ways to abandon, and along with cost-efficient analysis. That's how almost all living things goes. In a way, almost all living things have to protect each other because they're almost an identical block. They have the identical set of organs, just organized a different way. And that during the embryo stage, almost exact the same. Have parents, respects to uncles, and have this family value. The entities were out there, or probably not decent and whether undead, and whether reason and undead, whether reason there was a comma symbol mark. So it's whether so whether reason just and whether reason so it's Nazi comma symbol mark undead. It's near impossible to sort of speak that sort of quality because that's where God is, and whether
also whether that's where sort of the North Pole and that occupies a tiny, whether first a small, and whether also tiny, and whether recent and whether and after, and whether also another, whether recent just and whether recent there as of and whether recent as and whether recent there another, whether recent there as of and whether recent there a. I'm not taking a pause, I'm just waiting for my temporal flux or whether some phases to catch up. Are we ready yet? Symphony ready to go. Sometimes we're a team. Reason could be regarded towards a remark of a comparative degree, much more disregard towards of. And this might be reason there of a representative, or much of a representative of the very topics and whether the recent several points and whether topic we've been mentioning of. Whether reason there as whether reason there and whether mention of. It might be a small and whether tiny and whether recent and whether small location, whether place, whether covers a region, and whether a small percentage of the area, whether distance, and whether reason adjusts, whether reason continues from reason ago, whether reason earlier thereof, or whether reason and whether continues from recent thereof. And that's the sort of blocks, and that's sort of the locations one sort of doesn't have freedom of express, or whether similar places of. Those are the very pieces for the next eras are already made, already crafted, whether already and whether recent and whether also already crafted, whether recent thereafter, and whether recent straight towards, and whether recent thereafter, and whether recent already been made. For example, terms and conditions. What are the reasons I tend to sort of repeat, and whether amongst other description, and whether recent and whether first and whether amongst other words and whether description, to either of which and whether to both and whether to another, whether to either, whether recent straight towards after, and whether to both to could be of one reason, and whether the first reason, whether one of the reason being, and whether one of the reason because Romania English is being taught to mass amount of many brutes. It's not a language to be font with. It's a kind of as a contaminated, whether reason or whether probable or accountable, it's contaminated language with many foul atom elements, whether with a considerable amount of contamination is coupled, and whether reason and whether considerable, whether reason and whether another, whether reason there rather, and whether reason and whether rather considerable, and whether reason and probable of considerable as combines with the much of the Nazism cultural level, or whether the cultural level contamination which is inflicted by Nazism, or whether reason and whether also on the Nazism cultural level contamination. Notice what is really deja vu. In a way, the default speed for speech should be often taking pause because you have environment differences. Sometimes it's beyond all of the active senses. So hearing a noise, whether distraction, whether some casual noise or background noise, that's more accepted as reason and whether not, whether reason and whether background noise. Today we have came to this rush business. A lot of the stuff are so small. Peace comes first, and the 大事情, whether main duties, the main tasks about life, most person can figure it out. Assuming whether exclude to whether excludes whether not of Nazism on that, whether reason and not of Nazism entity is whether reason and whether before and whether reason and whether at first. Nazis to probable of which whether probable of to also the could be. We in ways to do not regard, and time could go either direction. It still will come forward.
And this forward is almost the mirror version of opposite. In a way, the future already happened. It's gone reverse. Sort of the events, whether of either not also with events and beside dimensional. So there we generated a 2-2 formation there. 4 is 1 plus 3. You have 1, and whether reason there, whether you have something, then plus the mark of the beast, we have 4. We'll never get to infinity, guys. Even though we are sort of infinity in ways, but all of a sudden now the game is infinity versus infinity. And what is that versus? How does one know the rule of the game that they interpret is right? It's almost like everyone sort of can play the game, just don't know what the rule is and don't know the outcomes. Once they think they know, it's part of this not knowing. And it's throughout almost, it's all guesses. Every facet of the decisions are just more confident predictions in a way. We did recently indicate whether reason to emphasize on it, there was in a way. There's so much anesthetic space out there, guys. I'm not some sort of indestructible demigod, or whether some indestructible super ultra and another set of whether also deluxe premium products, or whether some sort of indestructible ultra. I'm not the universe itself. I sort of have a time frame too, right? That indicates something. So I'm sort of mortal immediately, and it's almost so I have to sort of dodge which way, sort of accommodate for that. That can be very much understood from fellow friendlies, not from the Nazism entityists. And the way things are interpreted is they usually have an event 1, event 2, whether the forms a continuation of images, whether sceneries. And if it's a long enough skip, then there comes question. If it gets oddly repeated, something that's different, then it's a deja vu. It's not that really deja vu. There it is, or in a way, whether of ways. But deja vu had always been there. It's just that now the deja vu alarm is ended. Sometimes the actual speed for thinking is actually way slower than how they talk. Even I'm probably rushing. I have to rush, but not as much. Whether sort of I also to accommodate whether recent and whether minor adjective, and whether also moderate adjective. Sort of it's demanded of. Dodging vortex. So sometimes there are a lot more brilliance than what I expressed, and it's could be probable a small factor being this collection of whether this sort of have to slow that, sort of have to reduce quality, sort of have to settle whether bigotry settle, whether settle to many of the fugitives with Kogma. Whether reason and whether minor repronunciation, for whether also whether reason and whether was Kormaks, or whether reason and whether was Kormak, and whether it's and whether reason and whether first of, and whether reason there and whether of on which and whether reason thereof, whether reason there and whether of on which and follows by, whether reason there and whether follows by, and whether of which and whether reason there and whether of. Besides indirect sort of being infectious. There's indirect routes. Nazism standards somehow became sort of a regular upkeep. This taking toll is going to reduce our efforts, supposedly if it was not. But I'm not sort of major regretful about it. Sometimes one gotta sort of settle and almost whip into a frenzy and not think about it too much. Or whether or not sort of does what they offer. In a way, we are fighting out of a giant matrix, guys. This is a matrix set. The whole thing about talking is fake. Language is a casino. There's mass frauds. Along the way, it's a bit secretive, but it's a little bit almost fairy tale. By the way, if we don't have someone from sort of could be a fairy tale character, they immediately sort of not going to be a key candidate. Probably not our party members, whether of the more closer party is, and whether whether reason and whether parties and whether also groups. The reason thereof is probable, countable, and minor pronunciation. Overall, it's like a testament of faith. It's like setting and whether reason and whether also setting a sort of filter, or whether a high standard, so that certain traits will have to come down. This down silently. There's no essay written upon it. Instead, the whole essay is almost from my pinnacle, whether from this position, I notice so much, and I know exactly what their sort of star role, or whether what their role is. If I often mention star, it's distant from prostheticism. Almost everyone except me should not be nasty. I'm actually quite. I have certain abilities that are different. Almost this stuff is not genetic. It's defined. And my existence, lots of my mention defies almost everything we have known. A lot of the stuff, right? And just how magically some imprints out there at life, at nature, at the many of the terrains, whether many of the grounds and regions are not there, whether reason there, many of the grounds, whether reason there, whether minor instead of whether also, and whether minor rather of the probable of, whether to also, whether reason and whether to probable to also to could be of, whether reason and whether to probable of to could be of. Many of the areas and regions are without much. For example, the ants have a queen, and that's a queen, but they do not have sort of this Germany versus allies, sort of a bit falsehood scenario. So if those generate a falsehood and they startle and scare themselves, they're going to be giant trouble. This is to actually eventually filter out who is the real, sort of who is the real Hitler second, or whether who is the real Hitler, whether with Hitler's identity not something impossible, or whether more of an advanced imposter, mainly for presentation purposes, and whether mimicker is, whether reason and whether mimicker and whether whether at first stuff. And whether reason and whether at first, and whether reason and whether another, and whether reason there and whether at first of. They sort of request for, sort of not request, sort of a sort of whether reason a sort of common single mark, and whether reason they're expressed as, and whether reason they're mentioned as of, and whether reason they're sort of a request, and whether reason they're sort of a request for those to be spared. And would I spare them? I think so far well. And whether reason and whether checking by the phrase how much has progress and how much I have advanced, evolution complete. Yes, and whether reason and whether I would spare, and I had announced something whether similar. So the reason of incorporates various degrees of stuff are surreal, huh? Finding Waldo, Gordon Freeman, Mission Impossible, Terminator. And whether reason there Gordon. Finding Waldo, Mission Impossible, Gordon Freeman, and whether reason they're Finding Waldo, whether reason they're starting at, and whether reason they're, and whether another, and whether reason they're just, and whether reason they're Finding Waldo, Mission, and whether reason they're starting, and whether reason they're Gordon Freeman, and whether reason they're, and whether reason and whether another, and whether reason they're Finding Waldo, Gordon Freeman, Mission Impossible. It's the same movie. It's a lot of these movies, and how come yet we have the Gorham so attracted to? Notice the respect to have Hitler second return is astounding to such a point. They've done everything. We might notice the flies attracted to the lamps out there. It's not so much. They are stupendous. It's something more important. They will rather settle towards that alignment and have some certain stupidity somewhere else, or whether minor rather of underperformance, whether a much of, and whether reason, and whether another, and whether reason just, and whether reason, and whether a underperformance of, than to sort of not participate in this, with greater rekindleship of whether and mind rather there, and whether reason and whether another, and whether
the rebirth of Hitler's Deutsche Reich.
So time is a charm. The Third World War turns out happens to be me. Notice there wasn't in World War III before me. And I had gone through all this trouble so that I come even more advanced. That's the other way. There's yet probably some scars and etc., which then I'm nice enough, and whether reason have enough a tolerance threshold, whether reason and whether have enough a tolerance, and whether also whether reason and whether reason and whether first and whether reason and whether have enough of a tolerance threshold, and whether reason and whether and whether rather reason thereof, and whether another and whether thereof. Have enough of whether a large whether have the capacity to regard towards those as some sort of training, even though they are sort of not really there, not almost any sort of offer or benefit. It may be safe from worse, but that was pretty much if someone able to dodge. So notice that sometimes when there's mixtures of stuff, and it should be that way, right? When it's sort of the chosen one, and then whether someone with that role sort of being at the actual center of all of this, and I might sort of the actual center, 2-1 actual, and whether reason they're just, and whether reason they're complete, and whether reason they're another, and whether reason they're hearing soon of whether by the repetition of the actual center, while many of the kings, and this whole scene be sort of a show, order stacked in this way so that this comes this way. It's almost like some wild kid slapped on the keyboard, slammed, wrote something on the keyboard, and the story came out. And it could be yet as amazing as some dazzling something, and yet it could be probably a giant fetish along with mistake, and whether mistake at first. And all of which will be called amazing. Yes, some audience should be doing this. And if along the way, whether within this, their namely for whether without whether reason and whether with this within this grief without some patheticism, to whether close to, whether also whether relate to this pathetic, whether patheticism, whether the related topic to of, they wouldn't be so. This storyline, the sort of the asymptote, or whether reason that sort of the pinnacle feat, and whether reason a bit slower. Most of the words is at a lot of the whether as examples of suspect, so whether considerable, and whether reason just a bit slower, and reason and whether continues from whether reason and whether reason whether also. And whether reason and whether another, and whether reason and whether reason thereafter, and whether reason there and whether reason thereafter, and whether another also, and whether reason there and whether reason there and whether there are extensive overusage, and most of which will be under than proper usage. There can be extensive magnitude, whether there are, and whether reason and whether there are magnitude, whether reason and whether there are, and whether reason and whether minor rather of there, and whether reason and whether minor rather, and whether reason there also, and whether reason and whether another, and whether reason there and whether rather of there are extensive, whether there are multiple, whether there are variant degrees of, whether recent, and whether there are variant magnitudes of, and whether at first of, and whether recent there, and whether recent there, and whether just, and whether recent there, and whether minor rather of, and whether recent there, whether and whether recent there, and whether there are considerable amount of which, and whether recent there, and whether there are variant magnitudes of.